All right, welcome everyone to this episode of Monetizing Your Mental Capital. I'm your host, Will Christensen, and I have a guest here that I'm pretty excited to have Corey here. Corey and I, he was a Seller Labs customer, still is a Seller Labs customer. He was using Corey Brown from buffaBRAND is his name. We got chatting a little bit about some of the things that were going on inside the app and Data Hub and all of that kind of stuff. And I was like, wait a minute, I haven't had you on the podcast yet. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for being open to having some interesting conversation, I hope.
Oh, it's going to be good. The first thing I like to dive into here is, Corey, imagine that you're talking directly to one of these e-commerce sellers who's driving in the car right now. Why would he care to listen to you around monetizing mental capital? What experience do you have in that realm?
Yeah, so I think some of the interesting insights that I'll be able to bring capacity are going to be kind of the mental side of things. So that's an area that I've struggled with a lot and overcome in terms of building out a business without validation beforehand and kind of piecing it together along the way and overcoming a lot of non-business obstacles, personal obstacles to be able to do that. And I think hopefully I can bring a lot of value to somebody who's maybe thinking about building some services and has some mental hurdles in front of them, and hopefully we can help them overcome those.
I love that. I think that's going to be a very unique perspective. And I have a lot to say around mental challenges and boundaries and difficulties as well myself. Looking back on my entrepreneurial career, looking back on the first time I began to really I began monetizing mental capital early, but when I tried to start and eventually did start an automation consultancy, this was back in like 2017, which the funny part is at that point in time, I like to use Zapier as a gauge for like how cool or legit automation is. I actually reached out to Zapier 2011, 2012, something like that. And I tried to get a job with them. And there were only like 6 people on the team. And Wade emailed me back. I was like, dude, sorry, you just don't have enough coding experience. We need there. I was like interviewing for, employee number 7 spot over there, and stayed at the agency where I was at, continued to do all of that stuff, like way before automation was cool, way before the cool kids were doing it. And when I dove in, I really wish that I had more exposure to therapy, to, all of the different sides of bettering myself mentally. I know that data automation's growth was hindered. If any of my prior employees are listening to this, they're like, nodding their heads like, oh my gosh, yes. I know data automation's growth was hindered, in many ways damaged by my own idiosyncrasies and lack of mental fortitude or lack of ability. And in a lot of ways, everything from depression to PTSD to OCD, and all over the place. So I hear you.
I'm right there with you. We'll dive into a couple of those, I'm sure.
Tell me, let's go back in our journeys here. When was the first time you monetized mental capital that you can remember?
Yeah, so the first time that I started to monetize mental capital it was pretty early days when I was bouncing around between jobs. I'd come out with my master's degree. I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to be doing quite yet. I'm not one to stay put if I am not fully into a project. So I had a handful of different jobs over a couple of years. And what I realized was as I left each career position, I left in a very amicable way. And I would get that inevitable phone call, email, cold reach, like, hey, we don't know how to do this, or we really liked what you started to build, but there's nobody here to do that. Could you do that on the side for us? And I realized that I had some superpowers that were hard to hire for. We'll get into some of the difficulties of those superpowers in a bit, I'm sure. But that was really the start of the whole thing. I ended up creating this cheesy little business called CB Business Consulting. And I basically just took everything that I was doing outside of work and kind of filtered it through there. And I was, doing all sorts of different crazy tasks, like helping with inventory for people, writing SOPs, building out intern program, doing all this. And what it was is I'm great at organization and execution and management of anything, people and programs. And really, that's what it boiled down to, that was what people wanted to retain from me. And that was kind of that first touch point. I did that for a couple of years on and off. And that was my first taste of kind of monetizing. And I didn't come back to it for a while after that. But that was definitely a turning point, I would say, mentally for me.
I love it. I mean, I love what you said about like I had some superpowers that were hard to hire for.
We'll hit that. We'll hit that.
And I'm actually really curious. As you said that, like things started popping into my head where people would call me after a job and be like, "So you built this spreadsheet." And nobody knows how to update it. So how does this work? Or, just different things. Wait, hold on. What did you do? You connected this to that, to this, to that. Like there were just things that my bosses used to tease me all the time that someday I would make an Excel spreadsheet, turn on all my sprinklers at, weird times of the day and make me breakfast. But one of my dreams, so I have a YouTube channel called Automation Hunter, and I just review different automation tools and stuff. And on automationhunter.com, I actually one day I'm literally going to record a video specifically for Alan and Jeff, who were my original bosses, and I will turn on my sprinklers and make myself breakfast with a spreadsheet. Like someday we're not that far off, right? You've got like microwaves that you can turn on with Wi-Fi and different stuff like that, but it needs to be a little farther than that. I got to get like a fridge that like spits something out, or I don't know how exactly it's going to go down, but it's going to happen.
That honestly would be a hell of a way to retire. Like have that be the morning. It turns the sprinklers on, you walk out and you just have a video of it and it makes you breakfast, pours your coffee, you walk out on the porch and you sit down, you're like, I'm done. Like that would be a moment. So that's incredible.
Yeah, I hear you on the superpowers part of that journey. And I love what you said. Like, it was about doing everything for everyone. Basically, if they needed it and they were willing to pay me for it, I was in. And I think it's interesting how often our journeys in monetizing mental capital, recognizing, wait a second, I can get paid extra if I just do a couple of extra things here. It's interesting how often we recognize, like, wait a minute, I can monetize my time. And then how you sort of translate. For me, I recognize, I can monetize my time. And then I was like, wait, I can monetize other people's time. And then I was like, wait, no. This isn't about time. This is about value. Let's productize this thing. Let's like take the mental part of it and take it out of our heads, put it into SOPs. So like there's a journey that goes in there. Did you see a similar, like pretty quickly you were like, crap, I don't have enough time to actually sell?
Yeah. So I definitely ran into that because the start of my true business here, buffaBRAND, I actually was at the very start of COVID, and my wife was expecting our second child. My wife was starting her own private practice, and we had a 2-year-old who had to be at home 24/7. And so my time was both limited, but also somewhat unlimited because COVID was the weirdest time frame ever. So we kind of were just always here. But what I realized in the early days of that is I would be running around doing client calls, and then I'd be with my kid, and then I'd be doing all these different things. And what I realized is that there's only so many hours I can be on a call. I have to go past that. And one of the big things when I started my business was I was adamant that I was going to build services around my knowledge, not just offer the knowledge, but also offer the services, then suggestion. So like, hey, we need to work on X, Y, and Z in your Amazon account. Oh, also we do X, Y, and Z. And that was a huge turning point for me to be able to start to kind of take that next step to leverage other people's time. And then since then, we've kind of started to build programs and get away from just straight time. It's not always about time. There's only so many minutes in a minute. So we have to be able to find other ways to monetize outside of just a direct one-to-one ratio.
Love it. Corey, we're going to the superpowers. What were the superpowers you discovered you had?
Okay. So I'm a pretty transparent, straightforward person. So I have OCPD.
OCPD. Interesting.
Yes, specific variant of OCD. So I am an interesting person.
Okay, hold on though. So I have OCD as well, and mine has been more of a religiosity. They call it scrupulosity. And I've gone through enough therapy now that I am no longer plagued by it. But it was to a point where every week, 2 times a week, 3 times a week, I was having like serious episodes, not of like suicidal or anything, but like taking up hours and hours of the day for compulsions that would drive me to go do something religious or talk to a bishop or whatever else. Like it was affecting my livelihood a lot on both just a quality of life standpoint, but also the other side of it. So I get you 100%. My first diagnosis was actually a church leader of mine. I served a 2-year mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And at the very end of my 2-year mission, I sat down with my mission president and he said, Elder Christensen, you've seen the guys walking around with name tags probably before. Elder Christensen, do you have OCD? And I said, OC what? Like, I don't know what this is. And so I went home and we looked into a lot of what was there. And I've learned a lot about those sides. I get you. What does OCPD stand for?
Yeah. So obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So it overlaps a lot with your traditional OCD. It also goes more into just being very meticulous. I have more compulsions, but not necessarily compulsions that are a hindrance or delay me. If you think of a traditional OCD, you might think of someone who knocks, rings the doorbell 6 times or washes their hands. I don't have those, but I do have the need to keep everything perfectly tidy at all times, curate very specific spaces. I have very high standards, and there's a few other aspects to it. Yeah, there's some nuances. I always call it, it's my superpower coin. One side that creates an awesome employee, someone who can get anything done, who can stay on task, who can absolutely crush anything in front of them. I have the mental fortitude. I have focus, perseverance on things. When I set a goal, it's going to happen. Like, there's nothing that's going to stop me in the world from making that goal happen. But it also comes with severe anxiety. I used to drive my bosses crazy because I would want things on my schedule and I would want to do things my way. And they weren't always in alignment with maybe their budgets or their mental, focus. Yeah, their timelines. So I've been fired a few times as well, which I used to think was a huge sign of failure. But now I realized as I started my consulting business that I just wasn't in alignment with the environment that I was in, that I needed to work with people who are looking for those exact things. And now people look at me and go, wow, you can do all of this. When I used to get yelled at to say, stop doing all of that and just do the one thing I asked you to sit at your desk and do. And I'm like, I can't sit at my desk. I need to do this.
So Corey, you're one of those people. My sister-in-law, one of my favorite things to do is to go over to her bookshelf and like pull one of the books halfway out or something like that, just to see. And she'll come over and immediately slam it down and like give me a glare.
Yes, I had a specific place that I worked that I won't mention by name where there were some people from the back of the house who would walk through and tilt my diplomas and like things like that, because they knew they could get a rise out of me. There's definitely been some of that among my friend group. That's definitely, it's understood that Corey sits in a specific spot. We have our strengths and weaknesses.
And I think one of the interesting things was for me in getting fired, going back to that, I have been fired 2 or 3 times. I think I don't often reminisce on those experiences. They weren't my favorite, but honestly, getting fired was one of the best gifts that some of those employers could have given me, because it forced me to change. It forced me to reevaluate and say like, okay, now why did that happen? And what could I have done differently? And how do I approach the world differently now based on this experience? It's been a fantastic opportunity for me to grow. I did not always look at those opportunities as opportunities for growth. I saw them as signs of failure. And I think that's one of the cool things about mental fortitude or about mental health is the deeper you go into that healing journey and that understanding of yourself, your superpowers, the better you understand. I feel like the dark side of that coin is easier to see. It's more seen, especially for oneself, right? If I'm looking at my coin, that dark side's way easier to see for me, I feel like. And the longer I go, the more I see an equal, if not opposite, and even greater light side of that coin. I don't think they have to be equal to balance each other out. In fact, in many ways, I feel like my light side of my coin is way bigger than my dark side of my coin, especially as I've grown and understood myself better.
Well, I think the coin analogy is always fun because people think, well, okay, it's a flip of the coin, what you're going to get. No, it's not. I look at more as a coin on the table, or a token on the table, you get to choose what's face up. You can't always choose what's face up, but you know what you're trying to have face up on the table. And so, yes, you can have your light side up 90% of the time. And having the awareness of the other side of the coin, the dark, I believe the self-awareness of that shortens that journey and can bring you back to what you need to do. For example, I used to, and I still do, I have time periods where I am extremely productive. I have days where I get done a month's worth of work, it seems. And I have 2-3 days at a time, any given month, where I can't seem to get a single thing done. I cannot get myself to focus. I just have other things on my mind. And so sitting at a desk isn't going to do it for me. So like the last couple of days, as an example, I've struggled to get that focus. Today, I have knocked out everything I had on my plate for those 2 days, plus everything for tomorrow. And here we are recording a podcast. It's just, you have to just know who you are and when to push and when to pull.
Okay, so Corey, let's go back to the beginning of our mental health journeys and kind of compare where were you? Me business wise, I want to know where were you business wise when you went there? And for me, I was business wise. I had just come home from my 2-year mission, and I was going back to college. So I did some college before I served my 2-year mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and then I went to Brazil for 2 years. Came back. When I got back, I went back to college, and that was about the time where I was like, okay, I need to dig into that. Early in my life, my parents were like, yeah, we were pretty sure you have ADHD. The psychologist was like, oh no, you totally need to go do the medication thing. And my parents were like, I don't think you need to go do the medication thing. And so they opted not to do any of that. And I then began my journey in trying to understand, okay, well, where does this go? What happens next? And I started to look at that. And while I was in college, I was constantly trying to do little things like, set up websites. I convinced my grandpa this is probably the first time I ever monetized mental capital. I went and instead of monetizing my muscles, which were what I knew how to do in shoveling snow, I went to my grandpa who owned, he's passed away now, but still his family, his wife still owns a bunch of duplexes and apartment buildings. And I would go shovel snow. I monetized my mental capital because, hey, grandpa, instead of shoveling this winter, how about I build you a website? And he was like, you know how to do that? I said, kinda, but I'll figure it out. And he was like, okay. And so every day my cousins went and shoveled snow, and I went over to his house and got on the computer and taught myself over the course of like an entire winter to build a website. And he actually, we had pictures up of his apartments, and it was on one of the very first, it was like pre-WordPress. Like WordPress wasn't even a thing yet. It was a very old, I found a CMS system that would, allow you to search and all that kind of stuff. That was my first go. So for me, that's kind of the stage on which I started my mental health journey. How about you?
For me, it was honestly like even earlier than that. I think from the time I was about 12, 14 range, I was just a little different than other folks. I tend to go deep with people. I don't have a ton of friends. I have, a few very good friends. And I kind of realized I was a little more intense than other people, a little more focused, a little more goal driven. And there's a lot that goes behind that, but that's when I found running. And for me, I haven't shared on here. So I'm not going to say I'm an elite level marathoner, but I am to an average person. I'm definitely up there as far as marathoning goes. It's something I take very seriously. I train every single day. I've been running since I was in 8th grade. And so for me, I found that outlet really early, and it helped temper some of those wins of struggles for many years. And it still does to this day. It's something that helps me regulate and achieve and helps me in a variety of ways. But I think for me, it was really even just heading into high school. And I don't think that I found enough positive outlets for it until probably post-college, quite honestly. So it was a lot of trudging through, a lot of fortitude of just dealing with it. And I think now, shout out to my wife, who's been incredible. We'll be 8 years married this coming summer. She has helped in a ton of different ways for me to really, like we said, find those superpowers and mitigate some of those other things that we deal with. And, I'm really, really proud to be helping my children learn those coping skills at 5 and 3 instead of by ourselves at 25 and 23. So that's something very, very close to my heart, that has nothing to do with business at all, but it has everything to do with life.
Well, and I think the interesting thing about that is it has everything to do with business to some degree or another, because your ability to function. I mean, you go into a sales call and you're having a panic attack, I have a feeling you might have a difficult time closing that sales call. And that's happened to me before. I actually ended up in the hospital due to a psychosomatic anaphylactic reaction to a sales call. It was a very big sales, there were hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line kind of situation. And I ended up turning the sales call around only to have the reaction ended up in the hospital. So and we checked me out and they were like, okay, you're dehydrated and you could use some more exercise. But we don't really know what's going on here, what you're allergic to or wherever. I've had some therapy sessions since then and I haven't had another reaction. I still carry an EpiPen. I think there is something that I'm allergic to that goes along with the stress, but I think it's a mild allergic reaction combined with a psychosomatic response that turns into an anaphylactic response that ends up in the hospital. So I intimately am able or not able to function as a business person based on my ability to regulate and understand my mental health.
Yes. And as a solopreneur, I talk to others in the space, and it's a continuous conversation of it's lonely, it's depressing, it's difficult. You feel like you're on an island. You mentally, it can be just an absolute grind. It's something that for me, I was so cognizant of stepping into this monetizing of my mental capital that I had read the book Alter Ego or Alter Ego Effect, I think it's called. And you'll see in early days buffaBRAND, you'll see one of these everywhere, hat. So early days buffaBRAND, I chose to wear a hat anytime I was working with clients because I didn't have the confidence to talk to clients. I'm such an introverted person that if I were doing, so I needed that. I'd put the hat on and instantly I'd just be like, okay, I'm the expert. I can do this. It would give me this different energy, this different confidence. And it took me a couple of years in business, honestly, for you to catch me without that hat on. And nowadays you'll see me, we just saw each other at Prosper. You won't see me with the hat on. You'll almost never see me with the hat on now. But for about 2 to 3 years, you wouldn't have caught me without it. It got to the point where I would wear it even outside of there because it just gave me this edge of confidence. And then I realized it's not about the hat, but it is.
I think that's fascinating. If you were talking, let's say that we're talking to an entrepreneur who maybe has some of these challenges and they're nervous to talk about it with other people, or they're nervous to get help, or they're nervous to even know where to start. Where would you tell them to start?
That's a tough one because I don't want to give too much in the mental health advice. But when it comes to an entrepreneur, I honestly think we need more support groups for each other. I'd like to actually start one that's actually kind of on my mini roadmap to have some more people who are like-minded and get them in rooms or get them on Zooms and have some more open conversation. I think this is exactly what people need to just be validated.
Be open and recognize. Yeah.
You dealt with that too. How do you deal with having panic attacks on camera? That's something that's happened to me. That's not just a Will thing. That's I've had that happen.
I think we're creating our own mini support group here to some degree or another. In many ways, I now, because you've been vulnerable with me and we've talked about this and we're doing it in a way that's this is going to go out to lots of other people who are going to see that. Hopefully that helps them recognize Will and Corey are people you can reach out to if you're going through this stuff and you just need a shoulder to cry on virtually. Let's chat. Please, and that's not to say either one of us is a therapist by any means, but what we are is people who have been through some of this craziness and we get it. We understand what that's like. So I think the first step that you're alluding to is talk to people about it.
Yeah, I think that definitely lends to kind of one of my thinking points about this whole episode was just being your authentic self when I was told so many times by previous bosses, some of which ended up firing me, as we talked about, to leave yourself at home and come to do your job. Leave your personal life at home. Don't make other people think like that. Don't bring that here. We just want you to do your job. And that to me was a sign of a place I didn't want to be, but it just broke me. I just repressed. I just was like, okay, I guess. And this came up sometimes when I would share good things that were happening, but a lot of times it would be, hey, something's tough. Yeah, and I get it. When you're front facing at a company, sometimes you have to put a little bit of a brave face on. But that conversation happens too often in what, not even just corporate America, small business. When your boss says that to your face, they discredit everything about your human side forever. In that moment, they just openly admit that you are a cog in their machine, and they do not care about who you are at all.
And the interesting thing is, I don't think that's what they're trying to communicate, right? Like,
I don't think it is either, but I think
it sure is what people take home.
how could it not be? How could it not be? So yeah, so when it comes to that, yeah, reach out, whether it's us, whether it's someone else in the field. The other thing I would say is, sometimes something as simple as, reading about the alter ego effect and finding a little bit of a stage presence, a little bit of a confidence. Hey, if it's good enough for Beyonce, all right, Beyonce did this. That's her whole deal, right? Sasha Fierce, like she created that because she didn't like being on stage. Can you imagine Beyonce not liking being on stage, right? So when I read that about her, I was like, well, I can wear a hat. Like,
I got this. Yeah. I think it's interesting. One of the things that I think, if you're listening to this right now and you're thinking, crap, that's me, but I bet it's just me, Will, and Corey. Like, one of the things I will tell you, it is not, period. Number one. And number two, you'll be surprised at how, if you open up, how the people around you will open up. And if you ask for what you need, people are all about helping other people. Like, if you come out and say, look, I've got ADHD, could you stop clicking your pen? Because it literally, I might strangle myself if you keep clicking that pen over there next to me. Like, it literally, I can't focus. Like, I could dig through my stuff and show you. I have like full blown bow saw level, like you put over your ears and can't hear anything outside, that I would plug into my computer because the guy across from me would mutter while he was working on stuff. I couldn't focus. I couldn't do anything. And so rather than me try to solve all of that, I think I had to get creative and talk to people about what I needed. And I was shocked at how often it wasn't like a no, I can't do that. It was like I'll totally try to stop clicking my pen. And it was like, thank you. Like, thank you for, and let me know if there's something I'm doing that's driving you nuts. Cause I want to shift and I want to grow together and figure out whether that's going. And so I think that's the first step, is just leaning into the fact that this is real, asking for help, and don't be afraid of the response, because it's been the opposite of what I thought it would be.
Always. And my prime example for me is, I struggle if I'm looking someone dead in the eyes. I struggle to focus on what they're actually saying and work through the thought in my brain. Because I'm too busy worrying about me looking at them, looking at me. So for me, I need to look away and stare to be able to be supremely focused on exactly what you're saying and how it impacts the situation. And that's something I had to actually openly tell people, because there was an air of like disrespect, as if I was not listening. And I'm like, no, I'm listening so intensely that you don't have any idea. So I had to share that with my team. And when I did share that with my team, it was like, oh,
Corey,
like
we met in person at Prosper, and I actually remember you doing that. And I thought, oh, that's strange. I didn't like call you out on it or anything like that. But now understanding that, like, my perspective has even shifted on you a little bit. And we met each other in person, and I was like, wow, what a cool guy. Like, we had a great conversation. I never thought negatively, but now I think even more positively, because how respectful is it that you find an idiosyncrasy about yourself, and you're going to focus so hard on me that you're going to look away, because that helps you internalize what I'm saying, right? So
yeah,
I mean, it's perfect example.
And what a hard thing to get across to someone right at the start. So any clients that are listening to this, hopefully they'll understand a little bit too. And honestly, Zoom kind of helps some of that too, because there's not as much of that direct eye contact and all of that. But yeah, that's just an interesting little one that I actually had to share out loud for people to start going, oh, he's actually just listening to me. And then once you do, and you share back exactly what they're saying and how they're feeling, and then it's just so genuine, because it's just like, oh, he is really getting what I'm saying. So
Corey, imagine you could make a phone call back to Corey when Corey was getting the phone call and saying like, hey, you seem to have some superpowers we don't have anymore. Like just when you very first began getting those phone calls. Imagine you could make a call to him now and you could tell him something that he could do differently or that he could do to upskill his ability to monetize mental capital. And let's leave it in this mental health vein. What is something you would tell him to do sooner that you've now done later in your journey that you think might have helped you come to a better place faster?
Yeah. So ways you started that question, I was like, I would tell him to start doing his own thing sooner because,
And that's totally fair. So that's one piece of advice. Do your own thing. Go do your own thing faster. Quit those other jobs. Go do your own thing faster. And from the mental health aspect, what would you tell?
Yeah. So I think you have to just find your own wavelength in life and find your own, like the people that will vibe with what you're putting out, your wavelength will resonate with somebody out there. So if you find yourself, talking to my previous self, I would have said, you're not in the right place. You're not working with the right people. Go find others. Because I was sitting in a few different environments too. I would move environments and I'd still be like, man, this doesn't fit. This doesn't fit. I worked in, places that were very bureaucratic and I worked in places that were too flowy. And it was just like, it never seemed to fit. And for me, I had to create my own space to fit in. But now that I'm in this ecosystem of e-com, I see that I could have worked at any of the companies that I'm talking to, and I could have been a great fit. It's just a matter of finding the right space and the right wavelength to be working on. And so it sounds so easy, but it's like, if you're not feeling like you're bringing your best self to the project that you're working on, go find another project or make one.
Yep.
Or make a new project. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. That's fantastic advice because leaving a product, a project, a company, a group of people is so terrifying. And when it doesn't vibe, it doesn't vibe. So lean into it and you'll find something better. Totally agree. Totally agree. Corey, this has been a fantastic journey with you. You've gotten really vulnerable with me. I've gotten vulnerable with you. I think that the listeners, hopefully we've made an episode here that, maybe shifts some people's perspective around some of that because we're two very successful people and we both struggle with mental health. Like it's something that I think now I strive, right? And I still have my moments where my dark side of my coin is up and shoot, I didn't want that to be up, but it is. And that's part of it. But I would agree with you that it is more light side up than dark side right now for me. And it has been because I've been willing to lean in and work on it. And I'm doing therapy and medication, and both are fantastic options for me. I'm not saying they're right for everybody, but they have been really, really helpful for me.
And I just run 1,000,000 miles a day.
That's amazing, right? Like, how cool is it that there are different ways to attack this journey and kind of figure out where that is and go in and go deep. Okay, so to finish up our episode here, I have two more questions for you. I'm going to give you 60 seconds to step into an elevator with a potential, you step into the elevator and the guy next to you is like, yeah, I'm an Amazon seller. You're going to have 60 seconds to tell him about buffaBRANDs. And right after that, I'm going to have you share any tip, trick, hack, or book that you might have come across over the past year that's helped you upskill, and would love to hear both your, if it's the alter ego thing that you mentioned before around like the mental health side of it, is there a book that's helped from that side, as well as a business hack, tip, trick, or book? So ready, set.
Oh, we're on a real timer.
I'm putting you on a real timer here and go.
All right. So buffaBRAND Marketing is one of the premier outsourcing agencies for services within the Amazon ecosystem. We are vetted partners with Amazon and with Walmart, and we could become an extension of your company and become your entire e-commerce team. We are all located right here in Buffalo, New York. We're proud of that. Our entire team works in-house a few days a week so that we can collaborate. I think that's the best thing for us and for our clients. We focus on 4 main verticals. Coaching and strategy would be the number one. We have our account management, we have advertising management, and we have a full digital creative. Essentially, we can plug and play into whatever you need in e-com and become your go-to source for your brand to help drive growth
Awesome. You did it with 10 seconds to spare. Well done, Corey. All right. Tip, trick, hack, or book that you've come across in the last year. And I would love to hear a tip, trick, hack, or book on the mental health side and one on the business side.
Is it okay if I give you a few bucks? I'm a big book. So first off, the tip and trick, and I teach this to any of my new employees, and I'm happy to be able to share this with the world for the first time. One of the biggest things that changed my life, going from being an employee to an employer and creating that space, was I, for 5 years, spent 75% of my time on input and 25% on output. I focused on listening to podcasts, Tim Ferriss, many others, but I focused on greatness. I focused on e-com. I listened to nonstop podcasts. I read nonstop books. At about 5 years, I flipped that and I refused to go the other direction unless I'm going to switch gears entirely. So now I only allow myself 25% input and I have to do 75% output because I'm an expert in the field and I need to be creating things for other people to bring in. That has been a huge, so for the past 5 years, that's been my ratio, 75% output. And so when young people ask me when they come into this world of e-com, what can I do to get better? I say, go read, go listen, and just absorb for the next few years. Then you'll be ready to go to that next step. Don't rush that next step because you'll never be confident in your own abilities until you really feel like you have a grasp on e-commerce, but also just greatness as a whole.
That's cool. I really like that. I really like that. The 75-25 flip is not something I've heard before. I like that.
Yeah, I also extend that to myself when it comes to my personal athletic achievements. I spend 75% of that in my energy on output, which is my running career. And I only allow myself 25% to watch other people be great, because if you're doing it I want to be one of the people who creates greatness. So you can't create greatness if you're always just watching it, but you do need to watch it for a while to learn how it's done. All right, let's get to the books because I got a few of them and I don't want to take too long. All right, so I've got a few different ones that go in a few different directions. As far as I'm looking at the mental health side of things, the one that aligns most with the mental health for me that made me feel less crazy was Brewing Up a Business. It's a book about Dogfish Head Brewery. It has nothing to do with e-commerce. It has everything to do with how helter-skelter starting a business is and how you need creative people with extreme fortitude that are willing to try and fail at anything and everything to make something work. Obviously, most people would recognize Dogfish Head as a pretty prominent craft brewery scene. And they started just with a lot of trial and error. And that book is an incredible story about their journey and how just not everything they did came off. So that was something that helped me overcome a lot of my imposter syndrome of, I can't do this. That's for them. It's like, well, no, so many companies are not as well put together as you think they are. And going down that vein, Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, love that book. I read it once a year because it's the exact same thing. It's Nike, and you read about how fledgling Nike was and how just so much happenstance had to go on for him, how many little white lies he had to tell and money he had to, and just how he never had funding. And it's just this incredible tale of how fragile a business is the whole way. And obviously Nike's Nike now, but at that time, one or two wrong things and Nike never existed. I'm going to hit a couple other ones. So one of my all-time favorite books is called Ice to Eskimos. It's a book about sales. It's actually the story of selling a team nobody wanted, the New Jersey Nets, about selling tickets at the New Jersey Nets when they stunk and were historically bad for 20 years straight, and all of the creative solutions they came up with. I read it every single year and I glean new information from it. And second to last here, we have Never Split the Difference. It's a book. Okay, so you know that one.
The other ones I'm adding them to my wish list right now. As you're talking about them, I'm adding them to my.
So Never Split the Difference, for those that don't know, I forget what type of operative. He's some sort of federal agent that helped co-write it, and he tells stories about basically hostage situations and how you can work to get the result you want without giving away and splitting the difference. And for me, that was something that helped me to raise my prices, to not do services I didn't want to do. And that's another one that I'm probably due for a reread on that one, quite honestly. And then the final one that I'm going to share is Sapiens. If you haven't read Sapiens, It has less to do with business. It has more to do with the as historically accurate history of mankind as possible. I found it to give me extreme perspective on my human journey here. It talks about the rise of tribalism, the rise of religion, the rise of society, and does so in a way that's non-biased and is extremely exploratory into like how small we are in a part of the greater. And it actually just really opened my eyes to the human side of life. And I think that that's something that I try to bring into my business all the time. It's just being human centric and looking at people as humans first and team members second. And yeah, so I think that would be a great one for people to check out as well.
I love it. Yeah, Ice to Eskimos is not one that I've come across.
It's old. That's an old school book.
It says 1997. So and like so old enough that I couldn't find it on Audible. Super interesting. That's one I'm definitely going to check out. Corey, thank you so much for joining. Wealth of books there. How can an individual reach out and connect with you, assuming they're interested in doing so?
Okay, so you can hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find, Corey D. Brown. If you look up buffaBRAND, you'll be able to find me as well. Not big on social media outside of there, so buffaBRAND.com will be the other area that you could find me. And yeah, hopefully we'll see some people out at shows and so forth as well.
Well, appreciate your time. That's it for this episode of Monetizing Your Mental Capital. We're out.